it will appear to Windows clients and Samba clients to be a Windows server. There's a base system group which includes some administration tools, most of which are installed, 13 or 14, and other tools. Languages, what support you'd like once the system's up and running. Scroll down, you'll see what's currently selected. There are all sorts of languages across the world, and they're supported by most OSs, such as Red Hat Enterprise. If you need additional support, go ahead and select it, and then you'll have it available. And perhaps if a user uses your system, they can customize their environment to use the language that you've provided support for. With that said, without spending too much more time, let's move forward in installation so we can get this basic installation over with. Again, all along we've been using CD number 1 of 5. We've burned all 5, but we haven't used all 5, and generally we don't use all 5. And optionally, if your server has a DVD reader, then just download the ISO image from redhat.com for the latest version of Enterprise Linux, version 5. That is the DVD image. Again, you need a subscription, or you need to pay for the trial program in order to gain access to the ISO image. And in order to gain access to updates, which includes patches, which includes security updates for versions of programs installed in your version of Red Hat Enterprise Linux, you will need to have a subscription, a valid subscription with Red Hat. So keep that in mind. Whenever you use an enterprise class software such as SUSE Enterprise, Red Hat Enterprise, you must have a support contract in place or a subscription in place, and you will then benefit from any updates, patches, security patches or updates, and that will keep you free of or reduce your risk of exposure to certain exploits. So now dependencies are being checked. The underlying technology used by Red Hat Enterprise is called RPM, for Red Hat Package Manager. That technology is used to resolve any dependencies based on the packages that we've selected. Many Linux packages, regardless of distribution, rely upon other packages. So for example, the author of one program may rely upon, let's say, OpenSSL development packages to provide cryptographic support. And the cryptographic support will not work unless OpenSSL or TLS or some similar framework is installed. So in other words, there are many dependencies, many cross-dependencies that frameworks like RPM and Debian's apt or aptitude have to keep track of. Many dependencies. Again, Linux distros include thousands of packages, many of which have dependencies on other packages that may or may not be installed on your system. Over the years, those dependencies, the management of those dependencies, have gotten much easier. There was a time, as recently as 5 years ago, where you could spend literally all day or more trying to solve or meet the needs of various packages in order to get them to work. It's not necessarily a thing of the past now, but it's not as difficult. Now, this tells us here that we can click Next to begin the copy process. In addition, in classic Red Hat fashion, beneath root's home directory /root will be a file install.log. This file contains information regarding the installation process, errors, successes, so on and so forth. A kickstart file beneath root named Anaconda, and this is again classic Red Hat fashion, anaconda-ks.cfg will be created in this directory in the event that you want to mirror this installation to other systems in your environment. So in other words, all the selections that we've made thus far will be reflected in the anaconda-ks.cfg file. So keep that in mind, as when we look at the kickstart installation process, we will show you how you can reference a file and have these options pre-selected for you so that we can install multiple systems or even a single system much quicker. We'll click on Next. As you can see, the release notes are still available. Before we get into the installation process, we're forewarned. We're told that we'll need disks 1 through 3, not 1 through 5, but 1 through 3. It tells us if you need to abort the installation and reboot, please select reboot. In other words, if you don't have all the media, or you don't have enough space, or if there's some sort of problem, or if you've got second thoughts, then now's your time to exit. Or you can go back and make changes. You can always navigate to a previously selected area or previously explored area and make changes. Otherwise, if you're confident, move forward by clicking on Continue. Once you click on Continue, we move into the process that you see here. The file systems will be formatted. They'll be defined and formatted. By defined, we mean using Parted, which is a dynamic partitioning utility. The file systems will be created, and then using utilities such as make2fs, they'll be formatted using the ext3 file system or riser or whatever file system we've indicated. We've gone ahead and used the default file system layout, so as a result, the make2fs will be referenced. Now, in true Red Hat fashion, there are multiple screens maintained that you can access to see what else is going on with the configuration using the Control-Alt sequence, Control-Alt F1, so on and so forth. So again, our file system, this is the root file system in this case, is being formatted. The default layout creates a large root file system, and that's why it's taking so long to format the file system currently. So we'll just wait this out. And momentarily we can hear the disks spinning here very rapidly. They're SCSI, so it should move pretty quickly. There's the boot file system being formatted, and the install image is being transferred to the hard drive. And we should be moving forward into the copy process momentarily. So again, the installation process has not changed drastically since Red Hat version 9, or going back to about 2002, 2003. It's roughly the same, plus or minus slight differences. It's smoother. The detection of hardware is much smoother, especially your graphics card and USB mice. Like, for example, in this case, I'm using a USB mouse connected to the PowerEdge 2600 system, whereas years ago, I would have shied away from the USB mouse because of the lack of support in the installation process. But now USB mouse support works flawlessly. The image is still being transferred, so this will take a little while. And now it says it's starting the installation process, at which point we're going to see files being installed rather rapidly. And now our screen's changing. As mentioned, using the Control-Alt sequence, using F1s through 6, you can access other useful screens while Red Hat is being installed. Red Hat Linux is being installed. Control-Alt F1 all the way through F6. The screen that we're currently on is the F6 screen, or the graphical screen. Whereas when the system was booted and up and operational in production mode, Control-Alt F1 or Control-Alt F1 through F6 represent 6 text-based consoles, and Control-Alt F7 accesses the lone graphical console. So there's a slight difference between the way the consoles are presented during installation and when the system's up and running for production. In production, you've got 7 windows that are accessible using Control-Alt F1 through F7. But during installation, we have access to 6 windows, Control-Alt F6 providing us access to the current interface. Now, rather than spending time waiting for all the files to copy, as you get the picture, we're going to pause and resume towards the end of the installation. So here you see the packages being copied, and when we near towards the last quarter of the installation, somewhere in this vicinity, we'll resume, reboot the system, complete the installation, and then move on. So at this stage, we're in the last quarter of installation, roughly 2 minutes remaining, and the system will reboot after we instruct it to, and present us with a new Red Hat Enterprise installation, which will include, of course, the anaconda-ks.cfg file to facilitate subsequent Kickstart-based installations. And again, Kickstart is a method of installing the operating system without being prompted, so an automated promptless installation, unless of course you've missed some of the options. It's a way to reduce the number of prompts and help automate the installation. So now we're rebooting and the system checks will take place as usual. It's just a quick dismount from the installation process to this screen, and after the BIOS is checked, the installed physical components, then it will be presented with the Grand Unified Bootloader. So typical boot up sequence includes the BIOS, checking your local hardware, determine which disk is the boot disk, whether it's a CD-ROM, USB device, floppy disk, or hard drive. And in this case it'll be a hard drive, as we have ejected all of the CDs. Once it finds the bootloader, which it will momentarily, it presents the menu. And here's the boot menu. It typically displays at 640 by 480. Once we've made the selection, it will return to roughly 720 by 480. So it's a grub menu, version 097, and we can modify it by pressing E to edit, or modify the kernel arguments by pressing A, or booting to a command line, or simply pressing enter to boot the default option. This is the default option, Red Hat Enterprise Linux with the version of the kernel. There is no backout version, although we could modify the grub startup process, which we'll take a look at later on, which will allow us to insert one or more additional items and boot from them in the event that we need to boot the system in a different fashion, such as single user mode and so on. So at this point, if we press enter, then we'll move on to the new resolution. So here's the boot up process. File system is ext2fs, and if journaling is turned on, then we will be able to make use of quick recovery. The root file system is the first hard disk partition, so HD 0,0, so the first hard drive of the 3 SCSIs. And now various services are booting up. If we press the spacebar to show details, we'll see them. These are the different services and initialization steps, such as setting the host name, starting NFS, RPC, and different applications, Yum, to update the packages. And now we're propelled into a wizard. This is a first-time wizard, so you won't see this on subsequent boot ups. It welcomes us. Let's click forward. We need to agree to the license agreement, otherwise we'll be unable to use the operating system. Whether or not a firewall is enabled, it's enabled by default, and it permits SSH connectivity. Initially, I like to start off with disabled and then manually disable the ports that are not necessary, or enable ports that are necessary. So we'll disable the firewall and move forward. Otherwise, the default configuration, as you saw, will permit only SSH connectivity. You can turn on other connectivity such as FTP mail, etc.,